Carter, I am here in Yoho National Park in the Canadian Rockies. If by chance you haven't met me before, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Patrick Toomey. Field is really the story of Canada. The sky is spectacular. This tiny little field, it's the smallest permanent community in the Canadian Rockies, home to about 181, maybe 190 people altogether. It's about a third of the size that it was back until the 1950s when we switched from coal to diesel. But you'll see part of the old train station over here and some of these few big deciduous trees that were planted here to offer shade when people would arrive here. Now, because the hill back up into Alberta, the Continental Divide, and you're really more or less looking at the Continental Divide. Let me just give you one more. I know people are just joining. Maybe one more view here of where I just was up in Takaka Falls, which are, the second or third highest falls in the country, but it means thundering water. And they're up the valley, just up around the bend of Mount Field, which is over on the left. And I'll tell you a bit about that in a minute. 13 kilometers up that road. Spectacular there. But because the big hill was so steep when we were building the trains arrived here in 1883. The people working on the trains as they were digging into the rock would talk about stone bugs. Well, those stone bugs turn out to be the Burgess Shale. Let me just curve around to Mount Wilcott and Burgess up here on the left. This is the greatest, most important, let's say, fossil deposit on planet Earth. This is, for those who seem to need it, the missing link to evolution. This is the great variety of animals, the explosion of life in that Cretaceous period. You know, if we split the difference and say our planet's 4 billion years old, there was life appears in a single cell form after about 500 million years, but it took another 3 billion for it to become multicellular creatures. And so all of this is the Burgess Shale. And then northeast of Calgary, so about a 3-hour drive from here nearly, you suddenly find the Drumheller area, and that's where you find the dinosaurs, which are more like 75 million years old. And the reason they're there is because these mountains popped up out of the ground around 75 million years ago, lifted up that old shallow inland sea and protected all of their fossils. So that's pretty important right there. Look at this. I don't want to, someone's home, but look at this gorgeous little home right here. So Field is home, isn't it? So I'm sort of hoping, and Lynn, Alain, bonjour, I haven't been up around the corner here yet. So we're going to see what the flowers are like, because the last time I was here, we had such a late spring that the flowers weren't out yet. So we'll see if they're here. They certainly were. Hey, Ken, you're up on Mount Stephen. We're looking at Mount Dennis up there. He was one of the surveyors for the trains. Mount Dennis is world famous if you're into ice climbing, because that's where all the giant ice routes are, and they're all named after beers. So you can climb Pilsner or Kochny or Budweiser. There's a whole bunch of them. But this is what I was sort of hoping for, everyone. Right here, some of the fireweed coming out with the fresh water coming down the back. Now that is not perfectly glacial water. Still a bit of snowmelt way up in the mountains. And it's Sir Mount Stephen, who George Stephen was the first president of Canadian Pacific Railway. And indeed, now right here is the back of the house of the superintendent of Yoho National Park. Yoho is Canada's second oldest national park, just after Banff, 1883 as well, set aside. And Yoho itself, just even by name, is spectacular, because really it is a Cree expression of awe, and we most simply translate it as wow. And so it's so that is Mount Burgess and Walcott right over there on the left. And if I loop around, and if a train doesn't stop me getting back, I can even show you some of the plaques to it. So there's several sections of all this shale, and I have been up. You have to go up with a geologist in order to visit it. Again, the town itself has a very, very small population. Why is it called Field, and why is there a Mount Field? Well, Cyrus Field, who was a wealthy industrialist from the telegraph days, came out here on the train, and Canadian Pacific really walked a line of bankruptcy for about 8 or 9 years in its early history. They did everything to try and raise money. It is a lovely home, isn't it? To try and raise money. And so they actually named the town after him and gave him a mountain. In fact, I'll curve around one more time, show you Mount Field in the distance right there. And then Cyrus Field didn't invest a penny in town. So he got a mountain and a town forever and really did nothing for us. Look at that. People are chopping their wood in preparation for winter. And then people work for parks. You have, of course, a small medical service here. You have water services. Um, Goodwill of Maryland, maybe that was the nice salty taste. And that's pretty quickly, you've used up a whole community. The kids, they do have a small primary school here, but they bus into Golden. Although there is one young person who buses all the way to Canmore every day of the week and goes to the same school as my son because they're French speaking. So there is St. Joseph's Roman Catholic Church. And of course, the Catholic Church has been in the news in Canada a lot these days. But just sort of the sheer view of that is a very dramatic sort of alpine feel. There's a sign for the Trans-Canada Highway, the one road that comes through, although this road only came through here in the 1960s. And so Field would have been only a train town. Thanks, everyone, at that point. And then they straightened the Trans-Canada Highway, so they continued it from Lake Louise down the big hill, down through here and on to Golden. And so they're building them, but they're building it because it has to be done. They're straightening it. But every time they close this highway to work on that, then I come down here with my bicycle because I get to drive up the middle of the Trans-Canada Highway on my bicycle with no traffic. Now, the other thing people do in town is most people run sort of a B&B, and this is busy both summer and winter. So you've got the one little hotel, which is on down the road the other way, and I need to upload a photo at some point, is Emerald Lake. Many of you see these dramatic photographs always of Emerald Lake Lodge. It's always sort of what is this kind of isolated Canadian experience, but it's actually quite a high end hotel. There's lots of weddings. It's famous for that. So here's the Mount Stephen Guesthouse, and there's Charlie's Guesthouse across the road. But this is what happens in these mountain environments. Look at that, Samarna, Brown-eyed Susan's all popping up still. The mountains are spectacular right now, and of course we're well into August. That means our days are already getting shorter. And I do love on the side of this little house here, which has a very, very Swiss feel to it. And of course, remember the Swiss were brought out in the 1890s with the fish on the side. And that's because by coming down the Kicking Horse River, as soon as you get into the Kicking Horse in 52 kilometers, it meets up with the mighty Columbia River, hence British Columbia. There you go, the old church guest house. I bet you when you finally arrive here, you say thank God, which is pretty fantastic. So I'm walking down on Kicking Horse Avenue, and I'm just want to show you the inn. So if I wasn't squeezing in as much as I am today, I would actually sit down and have a bite to eat. But there it is, Truffle Pigs Bistro and Lounge. He redoes his menu about every 6 weeks. Coming down the valley, and if many of you will remember, when I'm here in the winter, you cannot even see these signs because the snow is piled up so big here. So these are still the Canadian Rockies here, absolutely. Right? But these are the deep internal ranges, the western ranges of the Rockies. And in fact, I only have to drive up there about 6 kilometers, and I get to my favorite creek in the Rockies, because it's Finn Creek. It's not actually named for my son Finn, oddly enough. It's named for Finnish workers who came over here after the Finnish Civil War. So, but there you go, 1950s, heralded the edge of the end of the Age of Steam. Feel free, it is so different. Feel free to take a photo of these, a postcard. Have a look at those gorgeous clouds up there for a second. Now, everyone, let's loop around and let's see if I can make it back across tracks. I cannot go and cut across those tracks here. You will actually be. I knew there was something abuzz, Dave. but I need to go back to the official crossing. You will actually get a fine if you cross train tracks anywhere else in this country. Oh, look, the liquor store's open. Hey, I'll drink to that. But the lush growth here, you can tell that you're in a northern place. Of course, if you get a lot, yeah. Okay. So, it's funny, Robert, you say the winter tires. I have winter and all season. I don't have summer tires. And I might just ante up for a new windshield this year. Of course, we all have cracked windshields when we live in the Rockies because we use gravel. We don't use salt on the roads for two reasons. One, the salt isn't good for the environment. We don't want that getting into the river system. And also, we get too cold. So you might put salt just in front of your step. But we don't get too icy, right? We don't have, it's only spring and fall. Now, at the moment, we're just having such a lovely climate. The big storm yesterday was great because it just kind of soaked the ground and it dropped our fire risk. I still use my bike. So I've made it over the tracks. Now, I realize we've already hit the 30-minute mark, but if you want to hang on with me for a few minutes here. I'll wander around and show you the signs that talk about the Burgess Shale and that history. And but I think here it's a little bit because we're so high up and we're so far from the ocean that we have, that's why we get this blue. I'm in BC now, but we call this an Alberta blue sky because there's sort of this ethereal color to it. I've been working on it, Cynthia. Folks, everyone might remember Cynthia did a tour with me in Concord. And of course, my deep French roots would always say Concord, Bangor. That's the way we pronounce things. But isn't it nice to connect? So let's go have a look at the river again. Sometimes you've been here with me and seen this be a deep, deep turquoise. And other times we've been here and seen elk walking out in the river. This is about right for August. Oh, I'm glad, Johanna. Thank you. But you'll see that already some of the gravel has become exposed. We hit high water about 3 weeks ago. Now the water is just going to drop. And the water cycle is very fascinating here. So by late September, it's all freezing up. And so thanks, Chloe. Do click on that link, everyone. But John Muir was born in Scotland. I've been to the museum of his home. But it's groundwater through the winter. And of course, water is flowing underneath all the time, which is why life can continue to exist. And then, of course, we have big, heavy snowfalls, particularly in this part. We get very big snowfalls here. And then they start to melt in late May as a rule. And then the water comes all the way up and it floods out this huge floodplain. This side is pretty big, but it's actually the other side of the valley, way out towards the road going up the big hill. So way out there in the distance, this whole valley for maybe 10 days will fill right up with water. And then it starts to drop. And now the only thing feeding the river at the moment are the melting glaciers. And that's why it's so deep and milky. That's the rock flower down there. And then as we get cold again, thanks, kid, thanks, Pam. As we get cold again, then of course the glaciers will stop melting. They'll only melt during the daytime and not nighttime. There's a Parks Canada vehicle with the green stripe. And so that's the water cycle in this part of the world. The waters feed, of course, all the agriculture in the Canadian prairies. And that is a very significant and important thing because if the glaciers all melt off, then we will have a food crisis in what is the biggest breadbasket on planet Earth. It's fun. Let me come and get you one of my favorite postcards here because there's Mount Stephen with the welcome to field. I'll try and move around the side. Actually, I think there's maybe there. Fortunately, there's the sign. The construction sign is talking about when the road is closing. Here, I'll just come around this pole for a second. Have a look. Have a look at that. I think that's a lovely thing. Thanks, Sue. So, actually, here, I'll give you I don't know. I think I'm probably pretty salty. I'm still in my cycling gear. So I'll give you a little field selfie here. You could spend an hour just looking at these signs, but this is the jigsaw puzzle of life. So it is just fascinating. So this is the one I've been to, the Mount Stephen Trilobite layers. And this is the whole story of what we call the Burgess Shale. It is very, very hard for us to conceptualize deep time, 530 million years ago. But when they were first working, they talked about these stone bugs. And now, of course, the whole area is protected. In fact, they recently caught someone. Thanks, Michelle. They recently caught someone stealing fossils. And they are throwing the book at him. I think it's almost always at him, isn't it? There you are. So these were all buried in here and preserved. So that's why even though we're in a cold, high mountain environment now, really 500 million years ago, this was a shallow inland sea full of life. And this is the explosion of life. I love this. Experiments in bodybuilding. So somewhere between like 28 and 120 distinct creatures, they still don't know if they're looking at part of a fossil or a full fossil. Some can be tracked out to what life looks like today. So, and this is fun. You do find the worms. I often say when I go up Mount Lady McDonald, there's barnacles up there. So so you really do have, and again, it's because it's all this sedimentary limestone, and that's the formation. So it's a fascinating bit of history here. So I was glad that someone recognized it. It does look a bit like a sausage, but there is life on our planet. We have some origin. This is an Alberta Visitor Center. Maybe next time I come here, I'll try and take you in there. But let me just cross over the drawing wall there. tents out and everything. But some of you might remember in the winter, I'd walk down to the edge of the water here. That's sort of fun. It is distinctly, so I told you it's about 18 degrees in the sun. Right now, standing here, it's probably, oh, hugs to you, Kathy. Um, it's probably 4 degrees cooler just coming off this water. Kathy, did you post that joke today about what you're going through? What was it? That was brilliant. Hey, merci, Alain. So, everyone, it's lovely to connect with all of you. Peace.